Pride is on the line this weekend at Great American Ballpark as the Pirates come to town. And have us wondering, is Elly De La Cruz playing the right position?
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Locked On Reds, your daily source for all things Cincinnati Reds. I'm Stephen Offenbaker. That's Jeff Carr, live in the same room. How about that? We have a combined 12 years of experience covering the Cincinnati Reds. We love baseball. We love the Reds, and we have taken our love of the game, our love for this team that never really ever loves us back, and we have turned it into information for you. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's podcast, we're going to be taking a look at the Reds' final home series of the season. The season is winding down. They're taking on the Pittsburgh Pirates out at GABP this weekend. Blake Dunn had himself a game yesterday, and we got to ask the question, is he part of the outfield conversation for 2025? We're going to get into that here in a little bit, and you're not going to want to leave early because Jeff and we're going to play a little game of David Bell Bingo. You're going to want to stick around for that. It's definitely going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to be taking questions and comments. Also, we are live. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this final City Connect Friday of the season. Let's get the City Connects going here. I'll be down at the ballpark tonight. So if you're heading down, come find me. Come say hi. We're going to get into all of these things right now. Before we get started, though, I want to shout out the sponsor of today's podcast. We're brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. All right, Jeff, I think where we will get started is this final home series of the season. This is it. We're down to a final 3-game set against those pesky Pittsburgh Pirates. Shout out to Ethan. How you doing out there on Locked On Pirates? This is not where I wanted to be when we got to this series. I wanted to be talking about being qualified for the playoffs. I wanted to be talking about what the postseason rotation was going to look like, and we get none of that. But we do get one final weekend of baseball down on the river.
Yeah, and I got the chance to go to Thursday's series opener or series closer against the Braves, and what a game that was. We'll get into that a little bit later on in today's show, but really, that was kind of the moment, though, that I kind of took a look around, and I was like, man, I cannot believe that we are here again in all of our hope and all of our optimism coming into this season, and it's just Groundhog Day over and over and over again. But looking at these 3 games, there is an opportunity. We're going to see Rhett Lauder pitch. We will see the return of Hunter Greene coming up on Sunday. And we've got some other guys that are hopefully going to get into the lineup. Hopefully we see some more Reese Hines. We see some more Blake Dunn, guys like that. But I want to start first when we look at this series, Steve, because after the Reds last played the Pirates, Pittsburgh made the decision to move Oneill Cruz off of shortstop and into center field. Now, I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball because I'm not going to say why I think he should be in center field. But is Elly a shortstop long term?
No, and we've talked about this from the start with him. Ultimately, somebody is going to come and force a move from Elly at shortstop to third base. I think Elly ends up as the third baseman of this team long term, maybe as early as next season. And you look at how things project, how things shake out, whether Edwin Arroyo becomes a member of this ball club, Matt McLain coming back. We've talked about Jonathan India's improved defense, first time positive outs above average in his career. He's worked on his defense. The best lineup for the Reds in 2025 may already be having Elly at third base. You may see a scenario where it's Jonathan India remaining at second base, Matt McLain, if he's healthy and ready to go, playing shortstop, and Elly playing third. That being said, it could be a year longer, but the move is eventually going to happen. And let's not forget, Elly is still young and developing and bulking. He's going to get bigger. He seems to be a natural fit at third base.
And the interesting part about this, because it was a thought that I had with the Pirates coming to town, is that, Oneill Cruz is a freakish athlete with his strength, with his arm strength, with his swing strength, all of that different stuff. But Elly is a better freakish athlete than Oneill Cruz is. And Oneill Cruz is a little bit older, a little bit further into his major league career than Elly. Oneill Cruz is kind of to the point where the Pirates need to figure out what is best for him. And he is not the defender at shortstop that Elly was. I think one of the biggest reasons that the Pirates moved him off shortstop is because he's not a good shortstop. Where Elly does make the plays, Elly makes plenty of mistakes. And there's some times that you could almost say he doesn't seem to have all of the concentration on certain plays, but he also makes plays that nobody can make. Oneill Cruz does not make that catch over on the left field line in shallow left field as the fly balls, falling down to the line on a crazy pop fly, or he doesn't make that catch out in short center field that Elly slides and kind of does like a basket catch or something like that. We've seen Elly do that time and time again. That's not what Oneill Cruz does. Now, Oneill Cruz has a crazy arm, and I think that's where the Pirates are like, maybe he fits better in the outfield. That's one of my reasons why I would like to see Elly tried out in the outfield, but I understand if he's not. I understand if you put him at third and you get that arm at third base where you make that ranging play on a ground ball down the line and you're able to pick it up and throw the guy out at first. But I do find that interesting because there's the first thought that came to my mind. The other thought when it comes to this series is the return of Hunter Greene. And I think that number one, what we should expect is he's not going to throw 6 innings. We are not going to see Hunter Greene from a month ago whenever he was healthy before he hit the IL. We're going to see the protracted version of Hunter Greene. I wouldn't be surprised if he gave up a lot of hard contact. I wouldn't be surprised if he was low on the strikeout total. This is going to be a pseudo rehab start. And we know how that went for Brandon Williamson. I'm not trying to put that smoke on this.
Careful.
But we're a little bit snake-bitten here after the Brandon Williamson debacle.
I don't like bringing Hunter back. I get that, it helps Hunter maybe be ready for the offseason and kind of finishes him on a better note than he bumped his elbow. But yeah. I don't really like this. To your point with Oneill Cruz, one other thing to consider with the Pirates making that move is the near catastrophic ankle injury that Cruz had. Yes. I don't know. Do you really want him in a position to have guys sliding into his ankle moving forward at second base? There's a lot bigger risk there than playing center field. So I think that probably factored in a little bit. I don't think Cruz is exactly the same player since that ankle injury than he was before the ankle injury. So there's that. And you look at, and the chat's on fire already with the move Elly around. Let me try and get a couple of these real quick, Jeff. Another Jeff is asking, didn't McClay play center field at you? McClay played shortstop at UCLA. He did play shortstop and he played center field also. Doug doesn't agree. He thinks that Elly in center field makes the outfield a plus defensive team.
Yes.
No, we're not doing that. He's staying on the infield.
It's because it's right.
He's just not doing it. Doug also believes that Santiago Espinal deserves a shot at third base. This is probably the most interesting question that's developing right now is how much of a believer are you in Santiago Espinal? What does he need to show you to be in this conversation, to be in a starting conversation? But we've only looked at him through a lens of great depth, great bench guy, great person to have around in case something happens. We've not really looked at him through a lens of can he compete to be in the conversation to be a starter next year?
And I maintain that. I think that the biggest factor on could Santiago Espinal be a starter is an answer to a different question, and that is Matt McLain healthy enough to play on opening day? If Matt McLain is not healthy enough, that opens the door. But if Matt McLain can play, then you have to answer the McLain India question before you can introduce anyone else into it. And that includes Jeimer Candelario. We're talking about Santiago Espinal. Jeimer Candelario is still going to be on this team too. He's got 2 more guaranteed years before he is a free agent. So I feel bad for Espinal because he has had a very awesome stretch the second half of the year. But at the same time, I don't know that he was ever going to do anything to jump Candelario or McLain in the pecking order. I think it's very easy. And look, there were people not us, but there were people that did this last year with Luke Maile and Tyler Stevenson.
Oh, yes, there were.
They said that Luke Maile should be catcher one and Tyler Stevenson should not. We've answered that question definitively this year. I believe Jeimer Candelario answers that question definitively next year, whatever his role ends up being on this team. So I still think that, yes, it is great that the Reds have Santiago Espinal, but I do not foresee him pushing for a starting spot.
And that's absent of any conversation about Noelvi Marte. We haven't even talked about him.
Right,
that's absent of any conversation really about what you do at first base. Is it Steer? Is it CES? Is it these other guys? Espinal, I think, is the odd man out. I think if you find a permanent home for Spencer Steer, whether that's left field, whether that's first base, wherever that might be, Espinal could be your quasi super utility guy. He can give guys breaks all over the infield. In a pinch, play a corner outfield, but I don't
really want that to be like once a month.
If he's relieving Spencer Steer in left field, you're not really getting much of a drop off defensively. So it would be okay. All that being said, this is a fun conversation, and we're going to have lots more of them as we head into the offseason. And, this is our last chance to get out at Great American Ballpark and watch these guys live this weekend and really see who's still playing hard in garbage baseball times, really where we're at, who's trying to leave a good impression as they head into the offseason.
Yeah, I tried to maybe sarcastically hit a high note when I was talking about pride is on the line, because quite frankly, both the Pirates and the Reds have not been playing for much for a while now. But as we look into that and as we kind of look at what's been going on, we forgot to ask the question about Blake Dunn. We didn't forget. We're going to talk about Blake Dunn and where he fits in this outfield of the future coming up right after this. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is the same formula that keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors knows that, because eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. They've got superchargers, they got roof racks, they got exhaust kits, they got LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, it's easy to see why eBay Motors is number one. And plus, they've got the eBay Guaranteed Fit, which means that your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to make your car that MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. We are talking some Reds baseball here today, every day, every week, every month, all year long, because we are Locked On Reds every single day. Make sure that you subscribe to get 30 minutes at least, or more sometimes, of Reds talk in your feed every single day. All right, Steve, we kind of looked a little bit forward to this Pirates series, and we'll talk more about that as we get into our Q&A here in a bit with the folks. I know that the comment section's on fire a bit with that. But I wanted to talk for a minute about Blake Dunn, because we didn't see very much of him this year. And in the final 8 games of the season, are we going to see enough of him to be like, oh, let's go? Probably not. But he had a game that at least raises an eyebrow on Thursday. In a game where the Reds got destroyed and there was no point in most of it, Blake Dunn gave us just the tiniest little sliver of a hair of a point as to how well he played and what does his future look like with this outfield.
What does this future look like with this outfield? That's really the question. I'll say this. If Blake Dunn is a factor in the conversation in spring training next season, it means that Nick Krall failed, has an F off-season grade, and that this team didn't try at all. If Blake Dunn is the conversation,
even as like a 5th guy,
he could play his way into being a 5th guy. Okay. If he's somebody we're talking about, if he's somebody that we're trying to convince ourselves can be the guy, then Nick Krall failed. No question in my mind. The Reds have to go out and get outfielders. They have to. Yes. Anybody that's in-house right now should not be our key talking point in the offseason. They should not be our key talking point in spring training heading into the beginning of next season. If they are, it means Krall did nothing.
But I will say this. I think that he at least gave me a raised eyebrow, like Spock or something. I can't do it, though. I'm not going to try. I just tried. But it was at least a thought that I had. I'm like, could he be a guy that, later on in the year, next year, the Reds have to make a call up because of injuries or something like that. And he is a guy that is down in AAA as like your 7th or 8th outfielder. I kind of feel a little bit better about that now, having just seen what he could do, because he hit a homer to dead center field off of Chris Sale, got on base 3 times overall with the homer, a single, and a walk, and he stole second and third on Travis d'Arnaud, who was a pretty solid catcher. And I think at the end of the day, he at least showed you that he can be a factor in a game. I wouldn't say that I'm expecting that sort of performance all the time from a guy like him, but while we talked about him this past offseason as a guy that really took a step forward last season in the minors, his tiny amount of playing time that we saw in the majors this year didn't really excite me that much all up until yesterday.
Yeah, the outfield picture, Jeff, I think Dunn is a guy you want to keep around. And I saw this from Carrot come by just now, and we'll kind of go there for a second. He said the Reds have many 4 to 5 outfield types on the 40-man roster. I think at least 2 of Hines, Hurtubise, Weimer, and Fairchild will be removed, maybe even 3. I would keep Dunn. Carrick, I agree with you. I would keep Dunn. I would keep Hines, and then probably Weimer. Probably. And then, Hurtubise and Fairchild may be expendable at this point. I don't know.
I'm surprised that we haven't seen, and I could be wrong about this. I don't necessarily know how Jacob Hurtubise's season has gone. I'm surprised we didn't see more of him this half of the season, because they've had Rhys Hines on the roster the whole time, but you could have fooled me because he's getting a pinch hit like every other day, and they're not giving him that much of a run, which I kind of felt like at this point, why not give him more of a run to see if he could be more of a factor next year? I think it's weird how they've managed Rhys Hines up until this point. I've seen some folks on Reds Reddit, been trying to get on Reddit here recently and seeing what the folks are saying over there. But there's been a lot of folks asking questions like, what is the point of Rhys Hines at this juncture? And it doesn't seem like the Reds are really giving him a lot of time.
No, it's been the playing time allocation here towards the end of the season is a head scratcher. And David Bell did things last season towards the end that was also a head scratcher.
Like, what is Ahmed Rosario doing? I'm sorry. What's he doing?
And taking up at bats. It's one of those things. While we're on this outfield conversation, Travis says he thinks that some of the chat are higher on Jake Fraley than you and I are. I will say that if you didn't catch my hot take on yesterday's show, my hot take was that Jake Fraley could be a 2020 guy next season. I am not down on Jake Fraley. I think he had a tough personal year, a tough professional year, and I think he's going to rebound. And I think he is really the conversation where the conversation for 4th outfielder starts. Right. Starts with Jake Fraley.
And that is our point, is that I think that Jake Fraley is the line. Like, if you're going to make him like the number 2 or the number 3 outfielder, then we have a lot of questions about this outfield next year, because that kind of feels like where he was this year. And albeit he's gone through a lot of stuff and he's had a lot of things that bring the human element into a baseball conversation. And at that point, analysis does nothing. But that also does not give me like a ton of confidence that he can blow up like we're hoping he can. Again, hope comes into that word. So I think that when you look at Jake Fraley, you're looking at him and you're saying, how can we improve the other outfield spots so that he is our 4th guy and not our 3rd guy? And if he is our 2nd guy, then we're getting back into that failure conversation.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to find yourself in a position where Jake Fraley has to be an everyday outfielder. Now, he's done better against left-handed pitching this year, but you don't want to be locked into that. This whole hope as a strategy thing can't work. We can't hope that carries over.
And I think our position coming into this season was we would much rather see Will Benson than Jake Fraley. That's completely flipped for next year.
I don't know where you are, but I am for sure. There's no scenario for me where, he should be at AAA. There's no scenario where I don't care what he does in spring. I don't care what he says in the offseason. He has to start the season at AAA.
A couple of at-bats yesterday. And just thinking about this outfield situation for a moment, but they brought him into a lost game that meant nothing at all because they were getting clobbered. And they're like, let's get Will Benson some at-bats and see what happens. And he struck out looking both times. And I'm just like, at the end of the day, I can't talk about plate discipline for a guy that strikes out looking because you struck out. Like the results say that you made an out. You need to start being productive. And quite frankly, he needed to start being productive about 2 months ago.
Doug says, is our next outfielder not on the team yet?
Yes.
He's not.
There
on
should
the
be
team.
two outfielders not on the team that are everyday
there
outfielders.
absolutely has to be one outside hire free agent style.
Yeah.
And then maybe you go trade for another one, but they've got to sign a free agent outfielder. And I'm talking about a press conference, stand there and smile for the cameras deal
Juan
for
Soto.
a big time outfielder. And I know you think that, and I'm trying to be realistic, but Santander is my target. That is the guy I want them to go get. He, depending on what Soto gets, it's going to set that outfielder market high is what it's going to do. I don't care. Go get him, sign him, give him a 3 to 5 year deal. Let's get this done. They need to go get a big bat for this outfield.
100%. But I know this, like the outfield situation as currently stands needs a complete overhaul for next year.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Jeff, listen, it's time to have a little fun because this season's been rough. The second half's been even rougher. And we've had to listen to a lot of David Bell post-game press conferences. And we're going to take that audio, we're going to take that video, and we're going to make it into a little game of David Bell bingo. We're going to play that coming up next. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. It's because it's America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers, everybody, not just new customers, so you and I can do this, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. And then with a YouTube TV base plan, you're going to be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game, and all you need is a Google account, which we have, and a way to pay. We've got that too. Best part is, if for some reason you don't like it, you can always cancel it at any time. This is the last week of the baseball season, really, Jeff. Time is running out, and you can still get in on your famous Elly parlay, which again is 2+ total bases, 1+ run scored, 1+ steal. That thing's been paying 4 to 1 usually all year long, and you've hit on this a lot. And if you want to hit on it, head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon right now and download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, we are back from break, and listen, the offseason is upon us. I know you're going to wonder, what are you going to do in the offseason to get your Reds news? We're not going anywhere. We're not taking a break. We're going to be around all offseason long to keep you in the loop. So make sure you have subscribed, click the like button, click the notification bell. Offseason Aloha Fridays are going to come back. We're going to be doing that, where we do a little more casual of a show and just kind of hang out and talk story with you all. Lots of stuff for you in the off season. So make sure you are subscribed. And with that, let's play some bingo.
Let's play some bingo, because I had this idea yesterday, because Lord knows that the Reds have lost a bunch of annoying games this year. They've lost a bunch of stinkers this year. They've lost a bunch of one-run games that it felt like they could have made 1 or 2 plays to actually get a win this year. And we hear David Bell talk about these losses. And quite frankly, thought you could make a bingo card about it, and you can make it into a game if you would so choose, because you can. Because the words that he said about this huge loss to the Braves are the words that he said about the loss in Game 2 to the Braves, are the words that he said last week, are the words that he said last month. He says a lot of the same things.
Our buddy Scott Campbell has the comment of the day thus far for me, which is, are they David Bell pressers or David Bell depressors? Pressers,
yeah, definitely. So we created a bingo card, David Bell bingo. Here it is. And if you're listening on audio, just to kind of describe it to you, it's a 9-grid block 3x3. And you have praise the other team, minimize issues, praise the Reds, and I meant to put praise Reds player, but praise player, solution is close, deflects question, quote, tough day, quote, that's going to happen, quote, learn from it, and quote, go out and compete. He says all of these things, and again, this is just in press conferences after losses. So considering the bingo card, let's see if we can get bingo from the press conference after yesterday's loss, and I think I've already got one.
Kind of in all areas, really.
He deflects, because he was actually asked the question to lead off the press conference from Jim Day. What'd you see from Julian Aguilar? No, he kind of struggled. What were your thoughts on Julian Aguilar? And he deflected by saying, yeah, everybody had a bad day. So we're going to mark that. Deflects question. which was the center back. Honestly, that could be a free space. Like normally in bingo,
Right.
isn't that the free space?
This is more like, maybe
He deflects
bingo.
it.
This is also like David Bell tic-tac-toe going on
Tic-tac-toe,
here right
yeah,
now.
yeah. Honestly, the screen wasn't big enough to have a big enough grid to say all the things that he says. But yeah, we could look at that maybe one day. All right, so we've got one spot. Let's see what we got. Another one here.
Yeah, tough day.
You could lose by 1. You could lose by 14. It's a tough
day. Tough day.
It's a tough day.
It's and I love that he stays on point with it's a very, very tough day. It's gonna be difficult. It's very tough. It's very tough.
Which, looking at the bingo card, we now have 2. Oh my gosh, we're gonna get bingo that quickly. Let's see. Next clip. Talking about Julian Aguilar again.
Yeah, it's not like we're looking to create those opportunities, but he's been really good. I mean, he stepped in, and we felt that he was ready, but he's more than done his part to show that he is, and it just wasn't as easy today. Not that it ever is, but it was just a tough day for him, and you never want to try to be perfect, but some days, if you miss, you're going into a good team like this, they can make you pay for it. And the big thing to learn is to not try to be perfect and continue to just try to make pitches and stay aggressive and stay on the attack. And Aggie's everything about Aggie, he'll be able to do that. That's who he is.
So, and actually, I didn't even set that clip up well. That was Mark Sheldon pressing, because earlier in the press conference, David Bell said that games like that are good for Julian Aguilar so that he can learn from it. And Mark Sheldon actually pressed him. He was just like, so what exactly does a guy like Julian Aguilar learn from a performance like that? And that was the long-winded question way of praising the player despite the struggles that he had.
And how does getting your teeth kicked in show that you've demonstrating an ability to be here? Like,
yeah.
Well, because we're all getting our teeth kicked in, I guess.
Like, I guess if you get knocked down, you learn how to get back up again. But he's got,
you know who else is on fire right now? Scott Campbell is on fire. Scott Campbell asks, did David Bell go to the Christian Bale School of Speaking? Grunt. I am David Bell.
I'm David Bell. Yeah. Yeah. So, all right, we got a couple here. We got a couple of spots that, let me throw it back up there. We're almost to bingo.
Praise the player.
So here comes another one from it. This is an easy one. David Bell loves to say this after a loss.
Not good for today's game, but Aggie needs to experience all of this, and what's going to make him good is he does throw strikes, and
he's going to learn from it. He's going to learn from that. Which means that we put that up there. Ah, man, another twofer. We got 2 in a bunch of different ways. I'm telling you what, we're getting ready to yell bingo as we speak. But I really feel like that in this exercise, we see a lot of just David Bell deflecting and saying these different things. Did somebody have him like did they bet that he couldn't say all of these different things and all this other stuff? Because it just sort of feels like that's what we're getting here.
Fastface is saying it's Bell GPT, which is pretty funny if you just kind of run David Bell out there on a loop. What would be interesting is if you took the losses from the last, say, 5 games and interchanged the video, would you be able to tell the difference? Would you be able to tell that it was from multiple press conferences, or would it all just look like it's the same press conference? And I think it would all just look like it's the same press conference.
It's Groundhog Day. Well, hey, we got 2 for, we got to see if we can get bingo here, because trust me, you can pretty much get bingo. But hey, this is a classic. If the Reds lose by X amount of runs, doesn't matter how many runs, David Bell is going to praise that other team.
Braves were able to put good swings on the ball.
And sometimes he even adds, like, you got to tip your cap to him. Got to tip your cap to the other team. And sometimes you just got to tip your cap to him. But hey, praises the other team. Oh my gosh, we're so close.
So close.
Bingo's happening, guys. I'm telling you right here. And I think with this one,
a couple walks and hit by pitch. Those are going to happen.
That's gonna happen. It's just gonna happen. You're just gonna lose sometimes. You're just gonna lose 80 times.
Nothing we can do about it.
You're just going. A playoff team it's just gonna happen. And we got the bingo. David Bell bingo. go ahead and compete. We're really close. We were really close to bingo for a long time there, and we finally did it. We got bingo. Honestly, like maybe we should do like a David Bell bingo after they win, because that actually might be the same board.
It could be. I was thinking a David Bell drinking game, but we would all be on the floor. Every single one of us would be passed out.
At all. No, that would be a bad idea. But one thing is for certain, David Bell, you can set your watch to it. You can write it out yourself. And I love that comment, David Bell GPT, Chat GPT, like AI. They don't even need to do AI. They just need to like play a recording of one of his things. And I'm glad. And I just wanted to point back to this just for one more moment, because I know that we as Reds fans love to do the thing, and Bengals fans do it. Every fan base does this. They want their reporters to push a little bit. They want them to push back. They want them to ask the hard questions. And Mark Sheldon tried to do that. But again, you got that answer from David Bell that wasn't anything.
David Bell's like, oh, no.
David Bell
we're
deflects.
not doing that, sir.
He had his lightsaber out. He's deflecting the blaster bolts. I mean, that's what he does all season long, though. Like, I think that, you could really do this thing where you try to call out, ex-reporter for not pushing back, but they do. Mm-hmm. And they get answers like that. And you can't just keep pushing back, because quite frankly, I think at that point, David Bell's just going to get up and leave. I don't think he's ever going to answer a question when you push back like that.
All right, let's move into what is my favorite portion of these lives. Let's get to some questions and some comments and just kind of see what we're doing. And we're going to start with What a Clown in high definition, it looks like. What a Clown HD says. Who is your opening day first baseman? Steer, France, Candelario, CES? This is a hard one, because I think if we could do this, it would mean that Nick Krall did what we're telling him to do. But of that group, if those are my choices, I would want to put Spencer Steer at first base, because it means they went out and signed a couple outfielders.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the thing, because in a vacuum, just picking those guys against each other in a vacuum, I would really hope it was CES. But I don't know that you could do that on opening day. CES really did have a tough year this year. And there's most likely a storyline, and there's most likely a narrative that the team gives us of, well, he dealt with injuries even when he was playing last year. So we believe that he is our first baseman moving forward, and they start him no matter the merits of the other guys. But like you said, if Spencer Steer's at first base, it's because they overhauled the outfield to the extent that we wanted them to. This offseason is going to be so fantastic about talking about how this team moves, because they definitely have some players that need to play. Mm-hmm. Pretty much all of them are infielders. So how do you only play 4 of the guys that they have while also having a good outfield? Because we know beyond a shadow of a doubt, there is no analytical number that you can look at that explains away how bad the Reds outfield has been over the last couple of years. And that is because their philosophy has been, well, whoever doesn't play in the infield can play in the outfield. Ain't happening.
All right, this from Carrie. This is interesting because I got a little pushback from our buddy Ken, Obscure X Reds, when we talked about the injury to Brandon Williamson and maybe it being partially the Reds' fault for bringing him up. Carrie says, did you hear Cowboy and Tommy's remarks right before Williamson went down? Cowboy saw it coming. I didn't hear this. Did you hear it?
I didn't hear, but I saw some folks on Reddit talking about it after the fact. And I can picture Cowboy saying this. Like, I can hear him talking about, the command was off. He wasn't locating his pitches. It probably looked like he was releasing a little bit late or early as opposed to normal, and what we have seen from Brandon Williamson here recently. But that for me is just the whole thing. Like, Cowboy is so good at analyzing the situation and presenting it honestly. And that is one of the big reasons why we love hearing him on the broadcast, whether it be on television or on the radio broadcast. But I appreciated his point of view on this because obviously he knows from the pitcher's perspective what a healthy pitcher looks like as opposed to what a not healthy pitcher looks like and who might be pitching through something. And while the numbers, I looked at the numbers to see, was his spin rate off? Was his velocity off? Those things weren't off. And I think it was because he was trying to overcompensate and hit those things, try to still have the velocity, try to still have the spin, but because he was overcompensating for something, he could not locate anything that he threw.
Carrick weighs in on the first base discussion. He thinks CES and France will compete for the first base spot. And if CES wins, France will be traded. He doesn't have any options. And the bench base is going to be tight. This is another thing with what this team currently has. Somebody probably has to get traded between now and opening day, whether that's a Jonathan India or if that's a France or if that's another guy to create a spot, because you don't want to let these guys get away for nothing. And I think France has showed he probably can get you something in return. India can definitely get you something in return.
Right. And that's really where Nick Krall's got to get creative. This is going to be an offseason that I think it's going to be hard for him to get an A, because we haven't seen him get creative yet. Mm-hmm. We've seen him do a good teardown and bring in prospects and maybe make a few moves here or there to plug some holes, but albeit this year he didn't plug enough of them. But when it comes to how you actually improve this roster, there's a very big argument to be had that signing a free agent is only going to compound a lot of issues with some other guys. So they may have to make some trades. And honestly, there's so much to discuss with all of that, and I don't want to get into all of it right here and right now, but it does not feel like all of Jonathan India, Santiago Espinal, Ty France, Jamer Candelario, Noelvi Marte, CES, and let's say TJ Friedel and Jake Fraley. Doesn't feel like all 8 of those guys are going to be on the roster next year.
Yeah, you remember it's 13. That's the number that they've got to work with. There's 13 spots, so it's going to be interesting because all of these guys can't be in the mix, as you say. Carrie asks, "What's our best guess as to the available funds, and how do you spend it?" I think the Reds have $55-60 million.
I think based on the estimates for arbitration,
and then
so 60 million spent. Let's be conservative with our estimate there. 60 million spent.
League average payroll.
So another $100 million.
Another $100 million on top of that. They may not spend that much, but let's say they spend 60 to 80.
Yep.
And would still keep them below the league average.
That would still be super reasonable.
That seems to be a reasonable ask in this market, even if they're crying poor. That seems to be reasonable. So that being said, you got to go spend $30 million on an outfielder at least.
And one of the other problems with this too, and I was looking at this the other day whenever the Brewers clinched the division. The Brewers are not a league average payroll. They haven't spent that much either, but they are a good team. And a lot of it has to do with the idea that Nick Krall and everybody keeps telling us that, well, the Reds are a draft and develop team. Well, the Brewers do that better than them. The Cardinals have always done that better than them. The Cardinals are a little bit in a dry spot right now, but I don't count them out for very much longer, probably back next year. And I think that the Reds have to figure out a way to improve all aspects of their organization, because the minor leagues took a step back this year. There were a lot of guys that had underwhelming performances that, in the eyes of a lot of prospect prognosticators, have knocked them down certain lists and have knocked them down certain ratings. And the Reds farm system as a whole took a hit. They are no longer a top 10 team. I don't think they're a top 15 team as far as a minor league organization goes. And so when you look at the fact that the major league roster needs some help, but the minor league roster is not going to be the thing that helps it, that's really tough for a team that constantly says that's how we're going to build our team. And so how do you fix both of those things? All of that has to come with, all right, what are you spending on this? What are you spending on that? And it does feel like, to Carrie's question, the Reds are going to have a lot to spend here. And hopefully they do spend it and they don't sit on it for whatever reason that they can come up with.
Scott Campbell says, with Duke Energy Convention Center going under a remodel, is this weekend our 2024 Reds Fest? I still hope they have a Reds Fest somewhere around here, even if we have to do it in your backyard.
Not a lot of parking around here, and road construction. But I would say that I've reached out to multiple convention center people around different convention centers in town to see what their thoughts are on this. And just about everybody's giving me the same answer that the Sharonville Convention Center gave me, and that is that there is nowhere that is big enough to accommodate the space that they use at Duke Energy. So either the Reds will have to get creative with how they run it, or there won't be one. And I can't imagine that the Reds would be okay with there not being one, because this is not just about the Reds. This is not just about the fans. It's about the Reds Community Fund. Mm-hmm. And that is their biggest draw for the Reds Community Fund all year long, at least to my knowledge. I know that they have that kind of telethon thing that they do, but I don't know that brings in the amount of money that Reds Fest does for the Reds Community Fund. So I've got to believe that they will come up with a solution. And I've also reached out to the Reds PR director to see, if there is a plan in place yet. Haven't heard back from him yet, but rest assured that this is something that I'm keeping my eye on and making sure that we know.
Do you think the Heritage Center is a viable option? I mean, it's got the parking.
I don't think it actually has enough floor space is what Duke does.
Mm-hmm. Even concourse wise, you couldn't.
No, definitely not concourse wise.
You couldn't use the floor and the concourse, and
I couldn't see that unless they got creative with the outdoor space. And that was something that the Sharonville Convention Center director told me, is that if Sharonville were to have it, they would have to have help with Princeton High School, and there would be a lot of weirdness, and there's not enough parking, and that's where you get into things where there is a lot of parking downtown at the banks, and maybe they come up with some sort of tandem at the ballpark at Heritage Bank Center thing.
Mm-hmm.
You could maybe see that happening, but again, you would have to have a lot of manpower, a lot of folks working that, making sure that people, security and all this other stuff. So I don't want to be the guy that plans that for them. So I'm not trying to do that right now, but I definitely want to see them be creative with this and
Absolutely.
make it happen.
This from Other Jeff. Other Jeff says, Pittsburgh and Cincinnati are separated by one game in the loss column for last place in the National League Central. Should it make a difference to us fans if they finish in last place or not? It makes a difference to me, mostly just because of my rivalry with Ethan over at Locked On Pirates, but also I don't want to be dead last. Not dead last. Not dead last is better than dead last. Right? I mean, it makes a difference to me.
Yeah, there's definitely a feeling of that. It'd be like, hey, but even if a Pirates fan were to come at you and be like, last place losers, would be like, great, you guys were second to last. Like, I don't know. I don't put a whole lot of stock into that, because at the end of the day, they didn't make the playoffs. And that's what we were looking for here. The thing for me that I'm curious about, and I'm looking up the rules right now, and maybe Carrick knows this off the top of his head, or somebody in the chat does. I think the Reds are exempt from the top 10 when it comes to the lottery of the draft. So losing more doesn't necessarily help.
Yeah.
I got to double check that. I don't know that to be true just because I don't have those rules off the top of my head. But I think because they're a revenue club, I forget. I'd have to look that up more. But yeah, suffice it to say, losing doesn't actually benefit them. But also not being last, sure, let's not be last.
Let's not be last. That's what I'm saying. Let's not be last. Is this Paquet guy? Like, all right, I like this name. Paquet guy says, am I in Cincinnati? Well, I'm in Fairfield right now. But yes, I'm at the ballpark tonight. I'm at the ballpark on Sunday, Saturday. OH, baby, I'm in Columbus. Then we'll get back to our regular baseball programming. Just don't. But yeah, I'm in Cincinnati this weekend. Come out and see me at the ballpark. I always look forward to talking with folks down there. Carrie says the same thing that you've been saying for the last couple of days, and it didn't come about, but I know you would have preferred this as well, to have seen Louder go against Paul Skeens this weekend. Not how it's working out. Louder's going on Saturday. Skeens is going on Sunday. So I think it's Hunter Greene versus Paul Skeens. Which,
kudos to the Reds. It wasn't their fault. The Pirates pushed Skeens back by a day. So because his fifth rest, or his, pitching every fifth day lined up to be on Saturday. That's why I thought Skeens, Louder, Saturday, let's go. But Pittsburgh pushed him back a day. So we're going to see Paul Skeens probably throw 7 or 8 innings while Hunter Greene's throwing like 4. And then we're going to have bullpen. I'm not loving that prospect.
That's right. Doug checks in and says it's time for Luke Maley to become a coach. We haven't spent a lot of time, and we will this offseason. But, yeah, I think they probably have a different backup catcher next year.
I think he has a team option for next year. So that'll be interesting. I don't know if they picked that up. They value continuity when it comes to backup catching. So maybe there's that, but there's also the other point, and somebody brought this point up to me because I forgot about it, but you are not vested as a major league player until you get 10 years of service time. Tucker Barnhart is currently in Louisville and does not have 10 years of service time yet. I wonder if there is a case to be made for him to be the backup catcher next year. Tucker Barnhart is not what he used to be ever since he left Cincinnati. He has really struggled for multiple different teams. Maybe bringing him back for a year to kind of be I don't know. I'm not even really liking that idea the more that I say it. So
no, that's a hard pass for me. I need
Yeah.
somebody that can.
I would like for him to have a nice moment this
Have a-
weekend, although we haven't heard about
Yeah,
that. So
if
I
they
don't think
pull a
they're gonna do
surprise
that.
for us on Sunday, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Just to do that. But no, I don't want Tucker Barnhart on this team next year. I want
No.
somebody. You're not going to get somebody that matches Tyler Stevenson's offensive production.
No.
That's fine. But I want someone that maybe is even better than him a little bit defensively.
Yes.
That you don't have a ton of drop off with offensively. That can catch. That's the one position they're gonna play a lot.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of the beast. So I need him to go out and get the best backup available. Sentiment be damned. I don't need a feel good moment all of next season. I want somebody that can go out there and there's not a lot of drop off.
But if you ask me what's most likely to happen, I think that most likely they just pick up the option and they keep him.
Yeah,
I think Merritt would disagree with that, but the Reds do not often run on merit as much as that is to our chagrin.
Bashface wants to know what the hell I'm drinking, and I don't know if that was from something I said or actually what I'm drinking, which is Dr. Pepper Cherry Zero Sugar. Free ad. I don't know which that was. It's probably something I said.
Something about my fridge right now. I got a lot of cherry pops in there. I got that. I got Cheerwine. I got cherry ginger ale. I got one other. I got Mountain Dew Code Red. A lot of cherry in my fridge right now. I don't know how that happened, but I love cherry.
Doug wants to know if I'm still going to do one-on-one interviews. He says I'm good at them. Thank you. So yeah, I kind of dropped the ball a little bit on a few during the season just because of scheduling, but I spent a lot of time. I kept promoting Rhett Lauder. I spent so much time chasing Rhett Lauder this year. Every time I had an interview on the books, maybe the Reds didn't want me to talk to him because every time I had a confirmed interview with Rhett, I talked to him at the beginning of the season in Dayton when we were down there for the media day. I had an interview lined up with him in Dayton again, as he had made a few starts. They promoted him. Worked with the guys down in Chattanooga, had an interview scheduled, promoted him. The day I was supposed to interview him while he was with Louisville, he made his debut for the Reds. He actually pitched that day for the Reds. So I tried. But to answer Doug's question, yeah, I'm going to be doing those. We were just talking before we went live today about some of our offseason ideas. There's going to be interviews this offseason, and those will be coming back, especially with the minor leaguers next year. Well, I'm just going to cast a wider net, I think, and just see where we end up.
And to clarify, the Rhett Lauder story is just horrible luck on Steve's part, but we have a great relationship with the Reds minor leagues teams, and they do a great job working with us to get to talk to some folks. And
just was not meant to be.
Every time the Reds were just like, let's bump him up. Let's bump him up.
All right. I know, Bass, you probably missed this. We talked a little bit about Will Benson, but Jeff and I, we're both in agreement that Will Benson starts the season in AAA. And I think at this point, he's really nothing more than a insurance depth outfielder, unless he can change our minds.
It's a bummer. And I know, because I clipped the segment where I talked about Spencer Steer having a season that has not met expectations. And there were a lot of folks that were like, how dare you talk about him and you haven't talked about Will Benson yet? And quite frankly, it's just because we've been talking about Will Benson all season at different points, and his season has been so bad that he has slipped into the realm of, well, yeah, everybody thinks that he is doing bad. There is no way that you can look at Will Benson's season and spin it in any sort of positive light. I don't even know that there was a stretch. There was a stretch of multiple games this year where you get excited about him. He had a game here or there where he would hit a couple of doubles or he'd hit a homer and another hit and get on base multiple times. But then he would go through another slump and he would go through a long period of time where he was making a lot of outs. And this was not the year that I expected, because I was hopeful of the things that he had talked about and the things that he had worked on in the offseason to become an everyday outfielder. And not only did he not hit lefties well, he stopped hitting righties too. And quite frankly, Steve, if you don't hit lefties and you don't hit righties, that's not really good.
If you don't hit righties, then you're not hitting anybody.
Unless somebody's kicking the ball to the plate and you hit that guy. I have been very bummed out with that, because Will Benson is one of the easiest guys to root for when it comes to being a baseball player, and he is just a super awesome guy. But at the end of the day, you need to produce, and he hasn't produced.
This is an interesting comment from Joey here. He says, the big dead machine, I like that. They need a total makeover, and they can start by getting rid of David Bell, who has already had enough time to get things moving in the right direction. I bring that up because this version of the big dead machine, the non-playoff team Reds, this version, I think, of the team, it's a lot closer than it was in 2015. It's a lot closer. It's a lot closer than it's been in the past. So totally tearing it down, no. No. We don't need another full rebuild. A change in manager, David Bell. We've talked about this. We're going to talk about it a lot in the offseason. It's interesting to me that the tenor changed from the front office a little bit. Yeah. It didn't change a lot, but it changed a little bit. It went from David's doing a good job, which is where it was just a few weeks ago, to we're going to evaluate everything when the question about David Bell is asked. So do they fire David Bell? I am still in the camp of no. If anything, they promote him. But I think he's the manager next year. I
just fall back on Ken Rosenthal's article where he talked about the fact that the Reds are in a group of teams that don't necessarily base their personnel decisions off of on-field performance simply because their revenue is not affected based on on-field performance. And the Reds have unfortunately not been a team that really focuses on merit a lot so much as loyalty. And Bell, the family name of Bell, is only outshined in loyalty by the family name of Boone in Cincinnati. So I find it hard to believe that the Reds are going to make a change there. Should they? Absolutely. I believe that this team needs a different voice. But the way that the Reds operate is rarely based on, what the situation dictates. And I think we are talking about David Bell as manager all year next year. I don't, because I foresee this team being better. And then we will be in the same boat as we were in 2023, where you ask, how much did he affect the results of this team? And I continue to say that it is a player-driven sport. And as good as a manager can seem, it's 90% the guys on the field. It's not very much who the manager of the team is. Because look at the Brewers. I don't think that Pat Murphy was the reason that the Brewers were good, even though they traded away Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff was hurt. The guys that they played made up enough of the difference. And Willy Adames, for a long, long stretch of the season, looked like an MVP candidate. He's not going to get it. Shohei Ohtani's going to get it. But Willy Adames carried the lineup. Their bullpen carried their pitching staff, and that's why they are where they are. It's not because Pat Murphy was pulling the strings, albeit he's going to win Manager of the Year. So I look at that and I say, if a good team is not affected by the manager, then you just need somebody that's going to hold them accountable. And while I think that merit leads that to a change of voice, the Reds don't always operate that way. I think he'll be here next year.
Here, Jeff, you read this one and take a crack at it.
Why doesn't anything, this is from Gary A., why doesn't anything fall on Brad Meter? It's all on Crawl, Bell, Bob. Because those guys are the leaders. Brad Meter, being the general manager, is where Nick Krall was whenever Dick Williams was the president of baseball operations. Dick Williams was the guy you looked at, not Nick Krall. That's why when we look at things, we don't say, well, this is Brad Meter's fault. And honestly, Nick Krall runs this team, not Brad Meter. Brad Meter takes his direction from Nick Krall. So that is why we constantly look at Nick Krall and David Bell. And quite frankly, I think in most cases, David Bell takes his direction from Nick Krall. But unless they want to just make a complete organizational overhaul, Nick Krall is definitely here next year, and David Bell is.
Because I think talking about a general manager versus president of baseball operations versus ownership, I think that there's been a change in baseball over the years. Whereas, in the 90s, the role of general manager is actually what the president of baseball operations is now. Like the president of baseball operations is the guy making the calls and doing the trades. And if anything, the general manager is really like what an assistant general manager used to be.
Yes.
It's still the title, but the real work is happening at the office of president of baseball operations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Carrot is kind of fact checking for us. I think you had kind of indicated that the Reds were not eligible to win the number 1 draft pick in the lottery. Carrick saying that they are. That he went and looked it up. That the Reds they can get the number 1 pick. So let's get the number 1 pick. Yeah. Can we do that?
Yeah, lose all of them.
Lose all the games.
They're not going to get the number 1.
They're not going to get the number 1.
Rockies, White Sox, Marlins, Angels. They're all going to have better odds. Although, I mean, the Reds were an above 500 team last year and got the number 2 pick. So what do we know?
Just so that I remember to do it later, but Carrie's asking about an off-season special dealing with all the injuries from me and kind of tracking how many were hurt and saying maybe we could talk to somebody. That's a great idea. Mm-hmm. I have a little more wiggle room in the off-season for the things we talk about. So I will look into that. I will, and I actually know a couple people that might be willing to do that. So I'll get into that, Carrie. That's a great suggestion.
That was an interesting thing for me too, because I read something on Fangraphs talking about all of, everyone always thinks that their team is the most hurt. And they kind of did a ranking as far as what projection systems had for the players that hadn't played. And because Zips was actually pretty conservative on Matt McLain this year, it did not look like the Reds missed out on a ton of WAR by him not playing, by CES not playing, and guys like that. I think they were middle of the pack as far as teams who were missing wins above replacement based on injury. So there's an element of our hopefulness that is attributed to players like that, where we're like, well, no, he was going to be better than that. But the models aren't going to say that because the models don't use our hopefulness as any sort of barometer. So there's going to be an inherent bias when it comes to how we felt injuries are going to affect our teams. So that probably would be good to get another perspective, get some folks in.
Right. And, and part of what I want to do with that breakdown is, we have just anecdotally said, oh, man, I think the Reds have had a lot more injuries than everybody else. Those numbers are fairly easy to find. I'll go compile total team IL stints, see where the Reds rank on that. And, I want to talk to some guys about how these diagnoses are made and how easy it is. I mean, it's hard. I know, like with the CES thing, this fracture that was undiagnosed, being in the ER every day, I see this happens. Radiologists will miss fractures on reads. It happens, especially in these wrist bones that are hard to see. So there's some stories there. There's some things to talk about, and I'll dig into that in the off season just because I'm interested in kind of seeing where that rabbit hole goes as well. And it may be one of those where not everybody wants to listen to the whole thing, but I'll do a little dive and we'll see what we can find. Jeff is asking, name one hitter on the 2024 Reds that had a good season, and then says crickets. No, I think there were some decent seasons. Elly.
What's wrong with Elly?
Elly is probably a guy you would say is a good season.
Tyler Stevenson had a pretty good year. I wouldn't say it was an amazing year, but it was definitely a much better year than he had last year. And it was a above league average OPS plus season. There's only been a couple of guys that have had an above average OPS plus, so there's that. But
Tyler Stevenson is on the list for me of guys that have had a good season. Elly has had a good season. India's
had a bad stretch here recently, which has
overall,
negatively affected
he's 245 still batting average on the year. I mean, it could be a lot worse.
And if you start with batting average, you have to start with the fact that league average batting average is down across the board.
Jake Fraley hasn't hit for a lot of power, but he's still hitting 278 batting average on the year. He's put the ball in place. It's not as doom and gloom. And I know, and someone had commented about you and I like being optimistic and kind of keeping things positive. Here, this from Doug. He said, to us, thanks for staying positive all season long and providing, much needed major doses of humor to defer the tears. We do try and stay optimistic, but at the same time, I think we find the right spot of not being pie in the sky either and not ignoring some of the bad stuff that's going on. And I think that the Reds being so disappointing, and so I get where other Jeff here is coming from in that it's easy to be like, whole season stinks. The team stinks. Nobody's good. Everybody sucks. Everybody's hurt. It's easy to fall into that. But at the same time, there's bright spots, there's building blocks, and there's things that you can look at with this team heading into the offseason, heading into next year, where they're not starting off from as bad a place as it feels like. And a lot of that feel is just from where we set our expectations for this season. It feels like they're a lot worse because we all set an expectation of the playoffs. For the first time in a long time around here, we looked at a team and said, by God, this team better be a playoff team or the season is a failure. And we're kind of all there. This season is a failure. Yeah. They're not a playoff team. And while that's bad, it's not a total tear it down and start over. They're in a place where with the right moves, they can still be a playoff team next year.
Well, and as someone once said, well, those kind of things they're going to happen, and gotta learn from it. You just got to go out there and compete. But I do think that is a great spot to wrap up today's show. I appreciate everybody for being super active in the comments section and joining us on this live show. We will be doing these on a regular basis as we hit the off season on Friday afternoons, calling them Aloha Fridays in case you're not an everydayer and you did not know that already. But we look forward to seeing you every single Friday afternoon throughout the offseason as we talk about this Reds team. But we're going to be with you every single day all throughout the offseason as rumors abound, as we look at how the roster moves, as we look at contracts that may be traded or kept or extended or whatever, non-tendered, all the different words. We are going to be with you every single day to explain it, make it make sense, and look forward to 2025 and why the Reds will get back into the playoffs, hopefully, in 2025. So thank you for joining us here on this live episode here today and making Locked On Reds your first listen every single day. Check out Locked On MLB for your next listen. Actually, I have a link in the description of today's episode. That way you don't have to go searching for it, as Sully is going to get you ready for the playoffs every single day. Because just like Locked On Reds, Locked On MLB is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every single day. And what does that mean that you and me are?
Wait, tripped all over that. We're going to keep you locked on Reds each and every day. You okay?
Talk too much. Talk too